Good morning, everyone. We'll just start in a few minutes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are going to start our session in a few minutes. Bom dia. Começaremos a cerimônia em alguns minutos. Good morning. We are going to start in a few minutes our opening ceremony. Bom dia. Nossa cerimônia de abertura começa em alguns minutos. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Professor Thalita Pinotti, Professor of the International Relations Undergraduate course at Faculdades de Campinas, and one of the academic coordinators of this conference. Today, I'll be your Master of Ceremonies. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to the 2020 edition of FACAMP Model United Nations. Due to the COVID outbreak, the 7th edition of FAMUN had to transition to an online format. However, this was not an impediment to gather over 200 students from Brazil who accepted the call for action proposed by the conference theme of FAMUN 2020, Be the Change, Shaping Our Future Together. FACAMP's mission is to contribute to society through the pursuit of education, learning, and research at the highest international levels of excellence. We continually strive to offer our students the best educational experience during their undergraduate years. So when they become professionals, they can truly be the change in their communities. But we understand that as a university, it is also our responsibility to empower youth in a broader sense. And FAMUN is the result of this effort to go beyond our walls and help shaping our future together. During the simulation of 2 General Assembly committees, 3 Security Councils, 2 Human Rights Councils, and 1 International Labor Conference Standard Setting Committee, FAMUN delegates will have the opportunity to discuss ideas to change and improve the world we live in, and present their commitments to the implementation of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This year, we also have a special feature. FAMUN 2020 is taking part in the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees MUN Refugee Challenge, with the purpose of challenging delegates worldwide to debate the major issues related to forced displacement. FAMUN delegates are committed to including in their resolutions measures to support and protect refugees all over the world. These 3 days of simulation will be filled with incredible experiences thanks to our partners and specialists. We would like to thank the Office of the Special Advisor to the Secretary General for the United Nations 75th anniversary, which has invited FACAMP through FAMUN to officially join and contribute to the UN 75 dialogues to shape the future of the UN and global governance in the years to come. We also thank the World Federation of the United Nations Associations, represented here by Mr. William Yotif, who has offered FACAMP all the support with transitioning to the online format. After successfully hosting UFUNA International Model United Nations Brazil in 2017 and 2018, FAMUN is in the process of being the first simulation to be affiliated to IMON, abiding by the international standards of the conference. That is why FAMUN is committed to the IMON approach, which offers the most accurate simulation of the United Nations in terms of leadership structure, rules of procedure, and flow of debate. We would like to give our most sincere thanks to UFUNA for trusting us for all these years. Now, I have the honor to introduce our distinguished guest speakers. I would like to welcome Ms. Luisa Stradiotto, FAMUN 2020 Secretary General. I also welcome Mr. William Yotif, UFUNA MUN Coordinator. I welcome Ms. Maria Luisa Ribeiro Viotti, Chef de Cabinet of the Executive Office of the United Nations Secretary General, who was not able to join us today due to previous commitments, but was kind to record her statement to all FAMUN participants. And unfortunately, we would also receive Mr. Dali Tenhoff, who is UN 75 consultant to the Office of the Special Advisor to the Secretary General for the UN 75th anniversary, but due to health issues, he was not able to join us today. Mr. Yotif, thank you for kindly accepting our invitation and having given all FAMUN participants the honor of your presence today. And we also thank Ms. Viotti for her generous contribution to our conference. Now, I have the honor to give the floor to Ms. Luisa Stradiotto, the Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ms. Stradiotto is a third-year student of International Relations at FACAMP. So far, she has participated in 8 MUNs as delegate, both in Brazil and abroad. And she served twice as Under-Secretary General for 2 different MUNs. Ms. Stradiotto, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning to all participants of FAMUN 2020. It is with great pleasure that I welcome you all to this opening ceremony of the 7th edition of FAMUN. Thank you all for being here today. And I thank our very special guests, Mr. William Yotif and Ms. Maria Luisa Viotti, for taking the time to share your experience and knowledge with us. It is truly an honor to welcome you to FAMUN 2020. And I would like to start by saying that as many governments and world leaders are casting the United Nations out in this period of crisis, when multilateralism would be fundamental to overcome it, we, the youth, have the responsibility to revive the spirit presented in the first words of the Charter. We, the peoples. We must be the leading force in this process of transforming our societies into more equitable, sustainable, and peaceful ones. I would also like to add that the decision to make FAMUN happen this year, even in the online format, did not come easily. We were not sure if it was possible, if people would be interested in it, or how to adapt every part of the conference. But we came to the conclusion that we should make the effort to convene FAMUN 2020 because of all that our conference could represent in these difficult times. FAMUN represents a space for dialogue, a space for critical thinking, a space for exchanging ideas with new people, with different people, and most of all, a space where everyone can grow and learn with each other. And considering the challenging times that we are living in, providing young people with this space was an opportunity to be seized. So I thank all of you who trusted us and decided to face the challenge of simulating online. All of this could not have been possible without the joint effort of the whole FAMUN team, Secretariat, and academic advisors. I know we are physically separated right now, but we are not alone. I hope all participants, delegates, faculty advisors, GCOs, CMOs, and the Secretariat take the most out of this experience and put it into practice. Listen to what is being discussed and bring it to your lives, your communities, your families, and your friends. Take FAMUN as the first step for other actions that can change your realities in a positive way. My last advice is that if you have never simulated before, don't be intimidated or afraid. Face this as a challenge to gain new skills and knowledge. And for those who are experienced in the world of simulations, keep an open mind and an open heart for the changes and adaptations, just like we had to do. Thank you, and I wish you all a great debate for the next few days.
I thank you, Mr. Adjut, for your inspiring speech. Now, I have the honor to give the floor to Mr. William Yotiv, Model UN Coordinator for UFUNA. Prior to working at UFUNA, Mr. Yotiv was Project Manager of the United Nations Global Teaching and Learning Project within the Outreach Division of the UN Department of Public Information for more than 14 years. Mr. Yotiv is an advisory council member of the Committee on Teaching about the UN and also serves on the International Institute on Peace Education Transnational Advisory Group. Mr. Yotiv, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Hola. It is my pleasure to send greetings and best wishes from our Secretary General of the World Federation of United Nations Associations, Mr. Boni Ngoma Hamadi. Having had the pleasure of being involved in past FAMUN conferences, we are excited to see this special online edition and look forward to having FAMUN become an affiliate of WIMUN. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers to speak to you today. When talking about items on the UN agenda, it is common to refer to them as global problems. We apply this term quite frequently when we talk about international affairs without giving it much thought, but what makes something a problem? I decided to look further into this question with the aim of seeing whether it would reveal any insights into the diplomatic process and whether there were any lessons to be learned for how UN meetings should be simulated. The starting point for my inquiry was to go all the way back to ancient Greek, where the origin of the word problem has been traced, and then study how it has evolved over time. The word for problem in ancient Greek is problema, which literally means to throw before. The most basic meaning of what a problem is linked to having something to do with throwing something in front of us. The definition is simple, stark, yet concrete. For me, it conjures up the image of walking in the woods and having a tree fall in front of you, and it raises many questions. The meaning is silent on the source of the problem. Who is doing the throwing? Are we the source of the problem, or is it coming from somewhere outside of ourselves? The definition is silent on the impact of what has been thrown before us. Does it have the effect of blocking us from completing some action or preventing us from reaching a goal? Or is the impact more benign? The meaning is also silent about our reaction when something is thrown before us. Do we simply walk away? Or do we struggle with what has been thrown before us until it is no longer a problem? Do we embrace the challenge, or do we lose motivation along the way and give up? If we fast forward to the 1500s, we find the word problem becomes prominent in the field of mathematics. At some point in your education, you must have been familiar with the term math problem, and it can be thought of as a question to be considered, solved, or answered. Here we take notice that problems require solutions. If you were on a journey and some obstacle was thrown in your way, you wouldn't just turn around and go back to where you come from. You would try to figure out how to overcome the obstacle that was thrown in front of you so that you can continue on your journey. Here we see that problems are linked in some way to finding a solution. Roughly 400 years after math problems entered the vernacular, the meaning further evolved to signify some type of ongoing or insurmountable difficulty. Perhaps it took that long for people to realize that some math problems were never going to be solved anytime soon. All kidding aside, finding solutions are difficult. If solutions to problems were easy to find, they really wouldn't be much of a problem. When things are thrown before us, you have to have some degree of motivation to persist until a solution is found. Otherwise, you risk giving up, or worse, feeling hopeless that a solution is not possible. A more modern definition of the word problem that has added another layer defines it as a perceived gap between some existing state and a desired state. This definition leads us to focus more broadly on the teleology or purpose of our actions, something that is missing from the meaning of the word in ancient Greek. In this context, problems occur when something is thrown in front of us that prevent us from reaching a place that is better in some way than where we are at this moment. To recap, a problem occurs in its most basic sense when something is thrown before us. A problem forces us to seek solutions, and if our goal is to get from where we currently stand to a better place, we must take the time to understand the situation before progress can be made. And this, in turn, requires that we ask the right questions. Unpacking the levels of meaning of the word problem, which we apply so often when talking about the work of the UN, helps at the same time to highlight important components of the diplomatic process. Each of the issues on the UN agenda, and there are over 170 of them, are things that have been thrown before us. And by us, I mean the international community. They are ongoing problems that are difficult to solve. Most of the agenda items have been discussed year after year for decades. Nonetheless, they demonstrate our desire to build a better world for all, a world where everyone benefits equally from the generation of wealth and no one is left behind. It takes great persistence to close the gap between where we are and where we want to be, and the fruits of persistence will only be realized if we first assess the situation we are trying to solve with great care. This is where the craft of diplomacy enters the picture, because an important part of assessing the situation involves an openness to listen to others who may have positions diametrically opposed to ours in order to better understand where they are coming from. This is a critical component of the negotiation process, and it is key to figuring out where and when to make concessions. Without this level of sensitivity, negotiations can break down and the hope of reaching an agreement can be lost. If you remember when I began my speech, I said that I was interested in seeing where examining the meaning of the word problem would yield any insights into the diplomatic process over the course of the UN's 75-year history. And one of the most interesting examples I have found in my research occurred at the very beginning of the UN's history. In truth, it predates the existence of the UN by about a year, when the representatives of the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviet Union were discussing proposals for a new world organization that would be able to maintain international peace and security for future generations. These discussions took place between August and October 1944 at Dumbarton Oaks in Washington, D.C. Many issues were discussed at Dumbarton Oaks. This included the very structure of the organization that was yet to be named, the functions and powers of different entities within the organization, which countries would be allowed to join, where it would be located, and much more. Many compromises and concessions were made that kept resurfacing that the three powers, the UK, the US, and the USSR, could not agree on that had to do with the voting procedures in the Council. The Soviets were insisting that all decisions in the Council should require unanimity of the four powers in the Council. That is the UK, the US, the USSR, and China. The UK and the US agreed in general with the unanimity principle, except for one condition. They felt strongly that if a member of the Council was involved in a dispute, that country should not be allowed to vote on any matters dealing with that dispute. The Soviets felt that this would violate the principle of unanimity, and they just could not accept it. The US argued that the American people, the American Congress, and other countries around the world would not accept allowing a country that was involved in a dispute to vote on matters dealing with that dispute. Mr. Stettinius, who was the Undersecretary of State for the United States, went on to say that the American government could not understand how any country could take the position that if it became involved in a dispute, that dispute could not be brought before the Council. What Mr. Stettinius was pointing out was that if the four powers were involved, if one of them were involved in a dispute and were allowed to vote on any matter relating to that dispute, the unanimity principle would allow them to prevent that dispute from being discussed in the Council. Sir Alexander Cadogan, who was the permanent Undersecretary of State for Foreign Affairs for the United Kingdom, added that none of the British dominions would join the organization if such a principle were adopted. On September 13th, 1944, at a meeting of the Joint Steering Committee, the disagreement on voting came to a climax. Ambassador Gromyko of the USSR began by stating that the position of his government on the voting issue remained unchanged. When Mr. Stettinius asked if this was the final word of the Soviet government, Ambassador Gromyko replied that it was, and emphasized that the principle of unanimity was of the greatest importance to his government. Mr. Stettinius replied that this statement came as a great disappointment and was a great blow to the negotiations. When Sir Alexander inquired about what should be done next, Mr. Stettinius replied that he did not know what to suggest and would have to think about it. This was the very epitome of a problem that, as the ancient Greeks had defined, as something that was just thrown before us. At one point, the special assistant to the US Secretary of State raised the question whether the organization they had been discussing these past few weeks was still feasible. Mr. Dunn, the director of the Office of European Affairs, who was a member of the American delegation, noted that they might have to consider a proposal for a completely different organization than the one they had been discussing all these weeks. In reading the summary record, you could feel the tension in the room during the discussion on voting procedures. Ambassador Gromyko pointed out that the Soviet government had made concessions on other issues because they realized the great importance of reaching agreement with other groups. The other members of the steering committee responded by pointing out that all the participants had made concessions. They realized the gravity of the situation at hand and agreed that no word of their disagreement should be leaked to the public or to other countries. Mr. Stettinius emphasized that the members of the committee must leave Dumbarton Oaks in agreement. He asked, what hope would there be for peace and security if the three powers did not remain shoulder to shoulder in the future as they had fought shoulder to shoulder during the war? He stressed that the continued close cooperation is a matter on which the very future of civilization depends. As I was reading the record of meetings at Dumbarton Oaks, I have to say I started to sweat, even knowing how it turned out, even knowing that 75 years later, the organization they proposed has stood the test of time. But stop for one moment and think how close the discussions came to falling apart over a simple voting procedure. I never realized this until I read the record for myself. The voting procedure was not resolved until the Yalta Conference in the Crimea, of all places, that was held in February of 1945. The disagreement was a major problem that was thrown before the three powers. It took determination and persistence to resolve it. One element that was not as apparent was the effort they put into understanding the situation they were facing. At one point, the US ambassador to the Soviet Union, based in Moscow, Ambassador Harriman, was called upon to explain why the Soviet government felt so strongly about the unanimity voting procedure. He pointed out to the State Department that the main reason was that the Soviets did not want the Council interfering with any potential disputes they may have with neighboring countries on their western borders. The unanimity principle would allow them to stop any dispute that might occur with a neighboring country from being discussed in the Council. This was an important piece of information for them to consider. Making an effort to understand the positions of other governments that have perspectives that may be opposed to those by a government you may be representing, and finding ways to articulate why your government supports a different position is an important element in the negotiation process, which aims to find common ground and reach consensus. The way forward in this instance was found through diplomacy. It involved honest discussion. It involved an effort to listen, I mean really listen and understand. It involved an effort and willingness to compromise and a desire to move all of humanity to a better place. On a side note, I want to bring to your attention some information I discovered while going through the records of Dumbarton Oaks that I was completely unaware of. While the negotiations at Dumbarton Oaks involved the four powers, they had all agreed that at some appropriate time after this new organization came into existence, France would be granted a permanent seat on the Council, making it a fifth permanent member of the Council. What was new to me, and maybe new to you, was that President Roosevelt proposed on more than one occasion during the negotiations at Dumbarton Oaks to create a sixth permanent seat for Brazil. Unfortunately, the UK and the USSR opposed this proposal, and it was never realized. Instead of becoming a permanent member of the Council, Brazil obtained a seat as a non-permanent member and participated in the first meeting of the Council in 1946. The push for granting Brazil a permanent seat continues to this day as one of the many proposals for Security Council reform that is being debated in the General Assembly. But it had its origins in the negotiations at Dumbarton Oaks. In your deliberations over the next few days, you will be challenged to work together with representatives of different countries to agree on solutions to global problems. This will require a willingness to listen to each other, to understand why one country may take a different position on an issue while another country will take a completely different position as well. Representatives must be willing to make concessions, just as the three powers had to do at Dumbarton Oaks. It will not be easy. Solving problems on a global scale are never easy. But if you are able to keep the spirit of consensus in view, you will find a path to bridging the gap between where we are now and where we want to be in the future. That is what solving problems is all about. And when it seems that compromise is not possible, don't give up. Keep negotiating. Ask your fellow delegates if anyone has any ideas of how an agreement can be reached. The UN is often called the workshop for peace, and the pillars on which it stands were forged with the tools of diplomacy, the same tools you will have a chance to use during your deliberations. Do not forget that the UN exists today because the three powers did not give up when it seemed like the obstacles that were thrown before them were insurmountable. They realized that the future of civilization depended upon them. This is the same spirit you should carry into your negotiations. Before closing my remarks, I wish to invite you to our fall online conference that will take place between the 30th October and the 8th of November. It will be a 10-day conference that includes simulations of the First Committee of the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, the UN Environment Assembly, intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform, the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice that will include the first ever online simulation of the Committee of the Whole, and last but not least, a simulation of the Security Council. The main focus of the simulations will be on the impact that the COVID pandemic is having on the work of the UN. Talk about a problem that has been just thrown before us. From the 2nd to the 6th of November, we will have many side events with UN speakers and scholars, presentations by UN specialized agencies, workshops on building model UN skills, how to apply for UN jobs and internships. There will be workshops for teachers and how to help students prepare for conferences. There will be social events and much more. We hope many of you will join us. And for more information, you can go to our website, wufuna.org/Wyman/online. Again, wufuna.org/Wyman/online. We wish you the best of luck in your deliberations and hope that all of you stay safe. Obrigado e adeus.
Well, I'm sure we can wait to see your conference. I thank you, Mr. Yote, for your powerful and fascinating remarks, especially the details on Brazil and the Security Council. Now, I have the honor to present you Ms. Maria Luisa Ribeiro Viotti, a Brazilian career diplomat and current chef de cabinet of the Executive Office of the United Nations Secretary General. Ms. Viotti kindly accepted our invitation to deliver a statement during FAMUN opening ceremony, but due to her busy schedule, she was not able to make it. And she has sent a recorded special message to all FAMUN participants. With you, the UN Chef de Cabinet, Ms. Maria Luisa Ribeiro Viotti.
Dear Professor Dr. Rodrigo Coelho Sabatini, dear Professor Thalita Pinotti, dear students, it's a pleasure to join you. The United Nations draws great strength from legions of young people around the world who participate in model UN events. You gather as Brazil and the entire world wrestle with an unprecedented crisis. COVID-19 has put the lives of billions of people around the globe in turmoil, inflicting grave suffering, destabilizing the global economy, generating an education crisis, and giving rise to a human rights challenge. The number of cases has now surpassed 25 million, and more than 850,000 people have died. The poorest countries and most vulnerable people are being hit the hardest, and there is a risk that decades of development gains could be reversed. The pandemic is also having a disproportionate impact on the world's women, They are the majority of workers in the most affected sectors. They're taking on extra unpaid care work. And as a result of lockdowns, abuse and violence against women are on the increase. Lives and prospects for the future are being altered rapidly, dramatically, irrevocably. Amidst the turmoil, the voices of the UN has been clear, calling for unity, compassion, cooperation. Since the beginning of the crisis, the United Nations has been pursuing a wide-ranging response. We have mobilized fully to save lives, stave off famine, ease the pain, and plan for the recovery. We have helped to provide medical supplies and personal protective equipment to more than 130 countries. The Secretary General appealed for a global ceasefire and set out a global response plan for the most vulnerable populations. The UN, peacekeeping operations, and special political missions continue to promote stability. We have been advocating for a rescue economic package amounting to at least 10% of the global economy, and for that relief to be extended to all developing countries. We are supporting work on a vaccine and pushing for it to be affordable and accessible to all. And we are fighting the associated plagues of stigma and misinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, as we address these immediate needs, we must also learn the longer-term lessons that the pandemic has brought us so that we can recover better. COVID-19 has highlighted global inequalities from health to wealth, to racial injustice, to the ways in which the disease itself affects some populations more than others. Even before the pandemic, discrimination and disparities were sparking social unrest and a breakdown in trust between people and government. Alarming levels of youth unemployment and a lack of opportunities in general were causing immense frustration. The virus has also underscored the world's fragilities more generally, raising the question of whether global systems and institutions are ready not only for another pandemic, which could be even more lethal than COVID-19, but also shocks and threats such as climate change, nuclear proliferation, and lawlessness in cyberspace. Indeed, the climate crisis could bring even greater disruption than the pandemic. We see this as floods, storms, and extreme weather grow ever more frequent and devastating. Yet, climate ambition is still well short of what science tells us is needed. As we strive to overcome the COVID crisis, the steps we take, and especially the financial decisions we make, can help to avert climate catastrophe. In that spirit, the Secretary General is asking all countries to take 6 climate-positive actions as they rescue, rebuild, and reset their economies. First, make societies more resilient and ensure a just transition. Second, promote green jobs and sustainable growth. Third, make sure that bailouts of industry, aviation, and shipping are aligned with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Fourth, stop wasting money on fossil fuel subsidies and the funding of coal. Fifth, take climate risk into account in all decision-making. And sixth, work together to leave no one behind. How the world recovers from COVID-19 is a make-or-break-it moment for climate action, biodiversity, and the health of people and planet alike. The recovery must also get at the other sources of instability, discontent, and social unrest. With that in mind, the Secretary General is calling for a new social contract at the national level. This would feature a new generation of social protection and safety nets, including universal health coverage and the possibility of a universal basic income. Education and digital technology can be two great enablers and equalizers in helping societies to create jobs and build capacity. This would also help to address rising inequalities, which in today's world go beyond income and wealth to encompass technology and the skills needed for the knowledge economy. At the international level, the Secretary General has proposed a new global deal This would include a stronger voice for developing countries in the global financial institutions, as well as reforms at the United Nations itself, with the aim of ensuring a fair globalization and a more equitable sharing of power and opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see from the high stakes involved and fundamental questions that are now on the table, COVID-19 has brought us to a crucial juncture. 75 years ago, the world faced a turning point following the Second World War, and leaders took the visionary step of creating the United Nations. Across the decades, we have sought to promote global problem solving and global public goods. Today, we are pursuing the Sustainable Development Goals, providing food assistance for millions of people, assisting 80 million refugees and displaced people, promoting human rights and advancing peace. We are also promoting digital cooperation to seize the remarkable opportunities of new technologies while safeguarding against their darker side. The benefits of digital technology highlighted by the pandemic, such as collaborative vaccine research, remote work and learning, and e-commerce, also reflect a growing divide between people who are connected and those who are not. Nearly half of the global population cannot connect to the internet and remain unable to fully participate in the digital age. Meanwhile, as efforts to connect more people proceed, new vulnerabilities have arisen. Cyber attacks and misinformation threaten human rights, privacy, and security. The rapid speed of adoption of digital technology has outpaced policy and governance at the national, regional, and global levels. The Secretary General has launched a roadmap to address these challenges by recommending concrete action to harness the best of these technologies and mitigate their risks. Ladies and gentlemen, at this pivotal moment, it is time to reaffirm our commitment to international cooperation and to strengthen global governance for an interconnected world. We face a steep climb on many challenges, but we can be inspired by the heroics we have seen throughout the pandemic, by the way that people have pulled together, and by seeing that swift and decisive change is possible when people unite with common purpose. The United Nations has been marking its 75th anniversary with consultations rather than celebrations. We have been taking the pulse of the planet through dialogues and a survey that has generated nearly 600,000 responses. The findings show unity around what people want: healthcare, education, jobs, an end to poverty, climate action, respect for human rights, and greater international solidarity. The United Nations is strongly committed to translating those yearnings into meaningful progress. But we cannot hope to succeed without the energies of the world's young people. Your generation is already mobilizing to address the challenges of our time and to build a healthier, more equitable, and sustainable future. From climate change to racial injustice, from digital entrepreneurship, you are making a difference. My generation needs to do more to ensure your generation's participation, to bring you to the table and into decision-making processes so that you can not only give your contributions to the solution of today's problems, but also, and more importantly, forge your own pathways. As you stand for change, the United Nations stands with you. In that spirit of common cause, I wish you a very successful Model United Nations Conference. Muito obrigada.
We thank Ms. Viotti for her special message. With that, we approach the end of our opening ceremony. I would like to thank again Ms. Stradiotto, Mr. Yotev, and Ms. Viotti for giving us the honor of their participation. Now, I ask participants to wait for a few minutes while we transition to FAMUN United Nations General Assembly opening plenary. Thank you all.
Welcome, delegates. Good morning. We'll just start in a few more minutes if you can wait. Thank you. Bom dia, pessoal. Só mais alguns minutos que nós já vamos começar a nossa plenária de abertura. Muito obrigada.
The first meeting of the seventh session of the FACAMP Model United Nations General Assembly is now called to order. I now invite representatives to observe 1 minute of silent prayer or meditation. Ms. Luisa Stradioto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government and delegations, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to address you at the opening of the seventh session of FACAMP Model United Nations General Assembly. I would like to thank the Assembly for having entrusted me with presiding this session. I am truly honored. In a time of uncertainty, such as the one we're living today, there is no shortage of issues in need of solving. Every single day, we face multiple predicaments, whether they may be on a smaller scale within our local communities, or as broad as a crisis of the international system. So people may wonder about the influence and importance within this arrangement. After all, how can one person make a difference or cause a significant impact when there is only so much an individual can do by him or herself? How can we actually be the change on our daily lives? Ending extreme poverty, fighting inequality and injustice, fixing climate change, these are all current issues that are undertaken by the Sustainable Development Goals, conceived by all UN member states for the 2030 Agenda. Surely one might find that addressing such issues is unachievable for the average person, yet they're not. Every single individual on Earth is capable of enacting a huge impact, and everyone is part of the solution. Whether big or small, our efforts matter, and they have the capacity to impact our local communities, our countries, or even the world. Be it turning off the lights and saving electricity, eating more fresh food and less meat, shopping local and vintage, or speaking up against inequality at your workplace or school. Every single one of these actions matter when we act together and are able to make a big difference. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, if we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a person changes their own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards them. And as we're gathered here today to take major decisions in the year of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, I would like for all of you to reflect about the importance of the discussions that we are going to have in the following days. In light of the pandemic that we're currently enduring, many of the issues that are a part of our agenda have reached a critical point. It is estimated that it will deeply impact food security worldwide, and we are at risk of a global food emergency with long-lasting impacts. Refugees especially are vulnerable, with more than 79 million forcibly displaced globally. Due to these reasons and more, we must take collective action now, in the spirit of cooperation and multilateralism to best respond to the issues on our agenda. As a part of the international community, it is our responsibility to address the challenges currently taking place around the world and make sure to properly tackle them in order to mitigate the suffering of billions of people. Thank you. I now give the floor to the Secretary General, Her Excellency Luiz Stradiotto.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President of the FAMUN 2020 General Assembly, distinguished heads of state and government, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Undoubtedly, the future of the world is uncertain right now, as we are facing crises in health, economy, and society that have resulted in exclusion at all levels. The violence of exclusion has severe consequences, especially to youth. If young people do not see themselves in places and people they admire, they are discouraged to pursue their dreams, to act as agents of change, and they are distrustful of their institutions. At the same time, at the moment in which we need more cooperation, multilateralism is weakened and global solutions are harder to reach. I truly believe that young people have the potential to solve this crisis and promote cooperation, and this potential needs to be explored. They have the capacity to de-escalate conflicts, build more sustainable and peaceful societies. When youth has a place in decision-making, they can create innovative solutions. Solutions that are necessary for the United Nations to fulfill its role. Youth, this is your future at stake, and your voices deserve to be heard. This year, with the celebration of its 75th anniversary, the United Nations wants to hear you. What are your priorities for the future? What world do you want to see 5 years from here? And what can you do to be a part of building that world? These are the questions we are hoping you can answer to yourself throughout the sessions. The campaign Shaping Our Future Together calls for all of us to look ahead for the future with hope, but with the awareness of the challenges we must face going forward. Conflicts, prejudice, and human rights violations are still a reality. Peace requires persistence, work, and dialogue. This is when we need to work more closely together than ever before. When representing your respective states and blocs, keep in mind the values of negotiation and consensus to create actions and strategies for a more sustainable world. One that takes into consideration the seriousness of issues such as climate change, youth, food security, disarmament, safety from violence and harassment, and a positive peace. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the Secretary General for her statement. May I invite the General Assembly to direct its attention to Section E of the first report of the General Committee, entitled General Debate, which contains a number of recommendations concerning the conduct of meetings and other items of importance. In paragraph 12, the General Committee recommends that the length for statements by individual delegations should be 2 minutes. May I take it that the Assembly takes note of the information contained in paragraph 12 and approves the recommendation that statements should be no more than 2 minutes for individual delegations? It is so decided. May I further invite the General Assembly to direct its attention to Section F of the report of the General of the Committee, entitled Conduct of Meetings, Length of Statements, Explanations of Vote, Right of Reply, and Points of Order, and Concluding Statements. In paragraph 14, the General Committee recommends that the length for explanations of vote and position should be no more than 1 minute. May I take it that the Assembly takes note of the information contained in paragraph 14 and approves the recommendation that explanations of vote or position should be no more than 1 minute. It is so decided. May I now invite the members to turn their attention to Section 3, dealing with the adoption of the agenda. The question of the allocation of items will be dealt with subsequently in Section 4. In paragraph 21, in connection with the adoption of item 3 of the draft agenda, the General Committee recommends that item 5 should be included in the agenda of the current session under the heading Role of Science and Technology in the Context of International Security and Disarmament. May I take it that the Assembly approves this recommendation? It is so decided. In paragraph 21, in connection with the adoption of item 3 of the draft agenda, the General Committee recommends that item 6 be included in the agenda of the current session under the heading Agriculture Development, Food Security, and Nutrition. May I take it that the Assembly approves this recommendation? It is so decided. The General Assembly has thus concluded its consideration of the first report of the General Committee. I wish to thank all the members of the Assembly for their cooperation. Distinguished delegates, I invite the General Assembly to begin its general debate. I wish to inform delegations that the list of speakers during the general debate is closed, and to remind delegates there are on the list of speakers that the length for statements by individual delegations should be 2 minutes. I now give the floor to the first speaker on my list, the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you. Ms. Luiz Stradioto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government, and delegations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Ms. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Ms. President, be the change shaping our future together. What does it mean for you? How does it affect and influence you? What I think, and I would like to say, is that it's not only the governmental representatives that need to make a difference in our roles, making agreements and resolutions. Of course, that's important, but the most part of our roads is composed by us. Therefore, what we need to think is that who has the power to change something for better are us. Furthermore, if you, just one person in this big planet, begin to make more correctly actions to have a better place to live, worrying or not, we will start to influence other people, and one by one, joining all of these people will be a big group making a big difference, and being the change for a better future for us and the next generations. However, I wish to highlight the importance of the young part of society in this whole to make of our roads the ideal place to live. They are the majority of our global community and the ones who have the most powerful opinion and force to conquer what they aim for. Thinking about that, they can use in the virtual or real environment, express their thoughts and show to the whole world the correctly creative and best way to get in a peaceful, non-violent, and environmentally friendly world to everyone. So don't think that just because someone is already doing something, that justifies you don't do it. Because if everyone has the same thought, no one will make a better action. So try to make the difference without fears and help us to shape a better future. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative from Germany for her statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ireland.
Mrs. Luiz Stradioto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government, and delegations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first congratulate you, Mrs. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Mrs. President, it should be first stated that the main goal of the United Nations should be to foster sustainable development and to promote human rights through consensual cooperation. However, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I ask you, how can consensual cooperation thrive When facing this crisis of multilateralism in the middle of a complex, multipolar new Cold War scenario. Ladies and gentlemen, in order to find out how the United Nations can maintain its relevance and adapt to this ever-changing 21st century, we must urgently strive to encourage the active participation of a multitude of voices inside and outside of the United Nations. And for that, the Republic of Ireland proudly reaffirms its role on prioritizing in discussions of international security, the inclusion of women, the inclusion of youth, and of other often overlooked agents of change. It is of our belief that the future of humanity is to be shaped simultaneously by the hands of each and every human being on Earth, and only through consensual cooperation and inclusive engagement can we ever achieve the 70 Sustainable Development Goals and change the world together. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative from Ireland for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Austria.
Ms. Luisa Stradiotto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government and delegations, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Ms. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of General Assembly. Ms. President, change is a process. It starts happening during a small individual action or along with big deeds around the world. The fact is, it has to begin somewhere. Debating at the United Nations General Assembly means we are fulfilling this purpose of inspiring change for those who are silenced every single day. We can build our future as human beings alone, but together we can go even further, because it's the power of this union that can provide a future for everyone and every further generation. Not for us as individuals only. We depend on each other. Having a conversation and listening are values that are forgotten nowadays, and that's one of the reasons why we have so much disrespect. But how can we change without changing our own behavior? How we expect to be the change we want for the world if we do not respect basic human rights? We need to learn how to listen and to pursue an agreement that minimally pleases everyone's positions, even if we do not agree completely, because we never know what the other is thinking about our positions either, or what he or she has given up to be at that point of consensus. Being the change means that we have the power of building a future. It belongs to our generation only. Young and motivated people who has seen all bad things in the world and hasn't given up. We cannot give up right now. Not at this point of history, not in the middle of a pandemic. I know it's tough, but it's not over yet. Only chasing better relations that are about swap of experiences is that we can shape our future together. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria for her statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of France.
Mrs. Luisa Stradiotto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, and delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to congratulate you, Juliana Magalhães, on selecting your president of the January. Mrs. President, if this process of change is individual or collective, but the fact that is hate change, it only things else brings progress. For we, people only care about on the interests in the state that impact is only the most difficult thing to fail to understand directly. However, with less evidence, we see that color, races, gender, sexual religions, and social class. Its characteristics that most that is when it's about relations of other people. Why? Does that make any difference? To this spirit, it really matter. We are mere mortals. This is stereotypes make to hungry that involved. Because of these attitudes, we can't congratulate that with latent comparisons. These are interests and entitled to common good. Talking and listening are forgotten to both us today. That is quite because then ever smart and efficacious. An example of this is that United General Excellence. She's a consequence of this matter. Everyone such gather corporations, which is all forget their own purpose or women's rings. The change is individual, but is also connected to change of others, because we shape the future together. Thank you very much. I finished my speech. That you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of France for her statement. And now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ethiopia.
Mrs. Luiz Estradiotto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government, and delegations. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Mrs. Juliana Guimarães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Mr. President, the world is facing unprecedented challenges such as climate change, the proliferation of mass destruction weapons, and the increasing inequality and poverty. The 2030 Agenda, adopted by consensus in 2015, has brought an horizon to solve our global problems and allowed the dialogue and planning between the civil society and government. The COVID-19 outbreak has highlighted and increased even more the global problems, endangering the accomplishment of the 17 SDGs. But the pandemic showed how integrated our world is and that we live in a global society. More than ever, it is necessary the union, the debate, and the cooperation so we can get out of this crisis and build a better tomorrow. Ethiopia has been working on strengthening peace, cooperating to reinforce the multilateralism, and putting efforts to fulfill the 2030 Agenda. The construction of the Grand Renaissance Dam will bring electricity to more than 60 million Ethiopians, developing our country and meet some SDGs targets. Also, our recent peaceful reapproach with Eritrea and the reinforcement of the African Union, where we are building a constructive dialogue and agreement about the Nile River based on international law and human rights, are a proof that we are doing our best. Multilateralism is a key to overcome the pandemic challenge, to put the world back on track to fulfill the 2030 Agenda. The future is made today, and we need to have the courage to debate and find consensus. I claim to all countries present here to stake in multilateralism so we can shape our future together. Thank you, Mrs. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Ethiopia for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia.
Mrs. Luiz Estradiotto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state government and delegations, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Mrs. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Mrs. President, the current pandemic of the new coronavirus makes us wonder if we are really prepared for the future. The way we deal with the changes imposed by the world and how we face them are characteristics that define the international community and its need to be the change, to change and shape the future together. The Commonwealth of Australia believes that the changes are based on the collective awareness, the way all governments respond as new challenges arise and require further action to be taken. From this, the collective is based on the union of individualities, and through respect for the collectivity, we can be the change, transforming the sweat of those who fought for the nation's construction in the consciousness and cloth for the next generations. The principle of peace, sustained by social development, is the key to shaping the future. Sustaining our interests side by side is something that strengthens the dialogue and resolution of conflicts through understanding and respecting the sovereignty of all states present here. The Australian community believes in the power of the General Assembly as an important model of relations between countries. This way, we hope that the goals of the Assembly will be achieved, respecting human rights and ensuring that we are changed, shaping our future and living together in peace. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia for her statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Ms. Luisa Sargioto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government and delegations, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to congratulate you, Ms. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Mr. President, first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude for having the opportunity to deliver this statement regarding such a pivotal matter to the building of a more peaceful and fair world. Having said that, the Portuguese Republic expresses its commitment when it comes to change and progress in a better world. However, in order to foster and implement a change, we believe that all states, nations, and stakeholders must unite like never before, since it's our obligation as humans to come together and seek for any kind of equality of every fellow human. No one can change the world on its own, and no one could be left alone. Therefore, multilateralism must be aimed. In addition to that, all nations should follow and prioritize the sustainable development goals promoted by the Agenda 2030 and any occasional agreement. Following that, Portugal, along with the European Union, emphasized proudly the involvement in change. It is important to mention investments in biological agriculture, sustainability, and protection of the ocean that promotes food security and avoid hunger. Besides that, there is the concern of a more effective integration of the human rights dimension that deals with inequalities aligned with ways to avoid corruption and armed conflicts. In this manner, Portugal is totally able and has the interest of sharing these approaches through collaboration with all nations and institutions, as previously said. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cuba.
Ms. Luisa Stangiato, Ms. Secretary General of FAMUN 2020, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state, government, and delegations, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Ms. Juliana Magalhães, on your election as President of the General Assembly. Ms. President, I would like to start my speech by asking, who are you, or else who are all we? As far as I'm concerned, we're the future, but not because we're young, because we're alive. Your parents are the future, you are the future, all the people through the screen are the future. We are the future. Yes, we should try to change the world, but because right now it isn't good enough and it's far from being ideal. But we shouldn't do it for the next generation only. We should do it for our own generation, for the world we live today. We will live in this world for so long. I mean, the next generation will come, they will born, they will grow up, and we will still be here. So if you want to live in a worthwhile place, we shall begin to change ourselves and our future now. Cuba believes the best way of changing for the best is doing it together, trading, negotiating, helping. We believe that one great person can change the world. However, a group of regular people can not only change the future, but change the present. As long as they are willing to fight for their beliefs. And my country is. We're ready to start a change and upgrading this amazing world, our home, which is getting sicker every day. So, can I count you in? Thank you, Ms. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba for his statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uruguay.
Ms. Luisa Stradiotto, Secretary General of FAMUN 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of states, government, and delegation, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate you, Ms. Juliana Magalhães, to our election as President of the General Assembly. Madam President, Uruguay is present here today because we believe in the power that we all have to be the change and incentive for a better future for our planet. With the right motivation and support, we can build the peace, institutions, and resilient societies that we have been trying for so long. In times of difficulties, such as those we currently experience, it is extremely important that we encourage your youth to be more engaged in decisions that will determine how we will emerge from this crisis, whether stronger or weaker. We believe that regardless of the outcome, crisis situations make us grow as a community. It's in difficult times that we see unity, collaboration, and humanity among all. May we all be an inspiration to all our young people, so that they can see that despite the crisis, we are here together to try to improve our world. That they don't lose hope of always being able to improve and evolve. That our youths don't see a lost future, but a future that deserves to be safe, not only by us and them, but by all the following generations. Let us look at the neighbors as one of ours, that the other peoples be also my people, all a single nation and a unity. Let us know that with each decision made here, we making history, so that we decide with wisdom, ethic, and always seeking the best for everyone. Uruguay thanks everyone for their presence. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay for the statement. We have heard the last speaker on my list for the opening plenary. The first meeting of the 7th session of FAMUN is now adjourned. Now I give the floor to the Master of Ceremonies for her final remarks.
Wow, what a great morning, right? I am sure the next days of FAMUN will be so energetic and exciting as the opening ceremony and plenary were. I'll now ask everybody's attention to some important information before you leave. First, high school delegates. Your lunch break will be from noon to 1:30 p.m. and the first session of simulations will start 1:30 sharp. Please check the Zoom link to your simulation in the conference guide or on Slack. Second, university delegates. Your lunch break will be from noon to 3:30 p.m. and the first session of simulations will start at 3:30 sharp. Please check the Zoom link to your simulation in your conference guide or on Slack. Finally, on behalf of FACAMP, I would like to thank all our participants who are willing to accept our call to action and attend FAMUN. FACAMP is proud to provide students from all over Brazil with a space of dialogue and cooperation. Now, I would like to call the other members of the Senior Secretariat. Ms. Maria Eduarda Casula, our Undersecretary General for Global Communications. Mr. Arthur Machado, our Undersecretary General for Management. Ms. Julia Green, our Assistant Secretary General for Global Communications. And Mr. Gabriel Pellegrina, Assistant Secretary General for Management. Now, this incredible team of FAMUN 2020 Senior Secretariat can formally open the works of FAMUN 2020. Luisa, you have the floor.
Thank you. Distinguished delegates, on behalf of the Senior Secretariat of FAMUN 2020, I now declare open the works of the 7th edition of FAMUN.
Thank you all. See you in our simulations in the afternoon. Bye.